Hi, this is Dan Olsen, founder of Lean Product Meetup, and tonight I was super excited to host Gib Biddle. He's a former VP of product from Netflix. He was there in the formative years of Netflix, and he gave an awesome talk today where he shared his model of delight, and he called it DHM basically, delight, hard to copy, and margin enhancing. Those are the three aspects of his strategy. And the cool thing is he shared a bunch of real world examples from Netflix from the early days, and he actually did these cool interactive polls, and you'll see the audience voting. He'll say, hey, here's a question, here's the decision that Netflix had to make. Would you do this or would you do that? And the audience would vote. So you can play along, kind of like choose your own adventure at home, and figure out what you would do, and then he shares the answer afterwards. So Gib is a friend of mine. He really knows his stuff in the product management world. So I think you'll really enjoy this video. If you like it, please like it or subscribe, and definitely feel free to leave comments too. Hope you enjoy it.
Let's get to the reason we're all here tonight. Gib Biddle, let's give him a warm round of applause here. All right. He's a product management expert and an EIR and advisor. He teaches at Stanford. He used to be the head of product in Netflix and Chegg. And tonight he's going to be sharing an awesome talk on customer obsession, how to delight your customers like Netflix. So welcome, Gib.
Thanks, everyone. Hello, Mountain View. How many of you are Netflix members? How many of you are paying? Oh, that's cool. In Buenos Aires, it's about 1/5. They're sharing with their ex-girlfriends, their ex-girlfriends' dads, etc. And they settle up at the end of the month. It's amazing. Couple things. So I'm obsessed. You are my customers. And I'm always trying new things. So tonight, chill. You don't have to take any pictures of slides that you see, because I'm going to hand you the PDF at the end. So I want you to sit, relax, listen, and then I'm going to ask you to do something else. Because what we're going to do is we're going to be experimenting with Slido tonight. So if you could go to Slido right now and put in #Gibson, this is the warm-up. Make sure it works. And same question. How many of you are members? Wow, that's a lot. Is that you, Ure? Probably.
You want to make sure everyone's got the URL?
Slido.com, is that correct? 19, it's working, it's working. I want to find the nose. Chase him down. Okay, I think it's working, Uri. Cool. So I want you to think for a moment about your experience with Netflix. How likely are you to recommend it to a friend or a colleague? I'm doing the first survey of the night. So I want you to just think, am I a person that puts it at 9 or a 10? Am I a person that puts it at 7 or an 8? Or am I a detractor? Someone who puts it at 0 or 6. So let's go to Slido, and we're going to find out the Net Promoter Score for Netflix for everybody in the room. Who knows how to calculate it? What's the answer? Yeah, that's low. That's low. That's surprisingly low to me. That means there's some folks out there that wish that Netflix were better. Like, what could be better about Netflix? Okay, we want live TV over here. What else? You want more regional content. What else do you want? More ratings. Bring back the damn reviews. What do you want? Non-English content. What else? I'm actually quite surprised. Let's switch back here, right? Usually it's in the 70s somewhere. So I love you guys. You're particularly unsatisfied, which really drives me. Trying to figure out how to just make things better and better and better is a big part of what we all do as product leaders. And it's hard because most of the time people can't really tell you exactly what they want. So I want to tell you a little bit about my early career. I was a product manager at Electronic Arts, bang, bang, shoot 'em up game company. And these are all the letters that I read from the capital G gamers. I listened carefully to my customers. I also was trained on how to be competitive. So you would, back then, this is 1991, I'm older than dirt. You would put a picture of the person you were competing with on your desk to remind you about your competition. And I got to say, and this is what I was learning about customer focus, none of that was particularly helpful to me. This was my first hit product, Sesame Street Elmo's Preschool. Oprah Winfrey threw Tickle Me Elmo's onto the stage at Christmas, which was super helpful to me. So that's called good luck. But I was beginning to learn about satisfying customers, and more importantly, in this case, their parents. And went on to, my first startup was called Creative Wonders, and worked with all these characters. And then sold that company to a different character. You might recognize Mr. Wonderful of Shark Tank. He was the CEO of the Learning Company. And we helped to grow that company, and we sold it to Mattel for $3.5 billion. That's how Kevin made his money. And we all went off. But 2 years later, Mattel spit back the Learning Company out of Mattel, and it was now valued at $350 million. That's bad. And it got me reflecting in this focus on customer focus, of listening to customers, of satisfying them and being competitive. It really hadn't helped to create long-term value. This is 2005. Most of you know what a DVD is, right? So Netflix started, it got big on DVDs. DVDs going back and forth by mail. Reed Hastings, the CEO at Netflix, I interviewed for the job of VP product. I did get the job, but he really asked me two questions. He said, Gib, can you delight customers? And my answer was, hey, I built Sesame Street Elmo's Preschool, and his kids had liked it, like, phew. And his second question he asked was, can you do consumer science? And luckily I knew what he meant, because I had asked him, hey, Reed, what do you want your legacy to be? And I thought he would say, inventing internet TV or building a huge company and brand. He didn't say any of that. He said this notion of consumer science. And the way he described it was someone like Steve Jobs has this natural sense of style and can predict the future. I'm just a geeky engineer. And so really all we can do is create an environment where we can just test lots of different stuff to see what works. And that's when he was talking about consumer science. So I'm going to take you on two journeys tonight. The one is from this world of customer focus. It's a good world. It's all about satisfying your customers, listening, competing. But I'm going to talk about this even better world, which is about customer obsession, about delighting customers, about experimenting and inventing a future that's wicked hard to copy. So you don't really have to worry as much about your competition. The other part of the journey tonight is from a really sucky Netflix website in 1999. Okay, the few designers in the room, you can evaluate it carefully. Back then, it cost $5 for a disc. It magically showed up in the mail about 7 days later. Okay, that's what it looked like. And then this was my experience the other night. And I hope you think it looks better. And there's really 3 chapters that I'm going to take you through tonight. The first is I'm going to share with you something I call the DHM model. And then the second chapter, I'm going to talk about consumer science, and I'm going to apply it in just one area, which is the growth of personalization over a 15-year time period, and show you what that looked like and what constant experimentation and invention looks like. And then Netflix has a problem it needs your help solving tonight, which is at the end of your 30-day free trial, you've input your credit card. The question is, should Netflix send you a free trial reminder saying, you're about to switch from free to pay? Should they send you an email? Should they send you a text? Should their personalized homepage tell you about this? So the third chapter will do that case. The way that I describe my job over the last, it feels like 40 years now, is the job is to delight customers in these hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. Where margin enhancing is just a fancy way of saying make money. And this is the DHM model. And I just want to share with you some of the balancing act involved in this model. And the first one is this concept of delight versus margin. So I know you would be more delighted with Netflix if I cut your prices in half, for instance. But that wouldn't leave enough margin to invent this better future where you had more original content, more regional content, all the good stuff that you want. And I'm going to share how we thought about this balancing act in a test from 2005, back in the DVD era. Now, if you remember, films would come out in theaters, and then 2 months later, they would be available on DVD. And there's about a two-month window. And the challenge at Netflix was that 2 months later, we'd have 100,000 folks that wanted that DVD the next day in the mail, and we could only afford 50,000 copies. So some people had to wait a week or 2 or 3 weeks for that. And so if you were asking, how could you make the service better for the customers, everybody was saying the same thing via surveys, via focus groups, via qualitative, via customer service data. Get us the new release discs faster. So we created a test. Think about the company at 1 million subscribers back then. We took 10,000 people, put them in this test cell, and they got a perfect new release experience. The title that they put at the top of their quay, which is how Americans pronounced the word at the time, they would get their DVD the very next day in the mail. That was really funny when I told it in Toronto. So there's this perfect new release delivery experience. Now, how did Netflix measure delight? It was all about retention. So at the beginning of Netflix, super sucky service, 10% of the members would cancel each month. Today, 2% cancel each month. And it's largely because there's no money in their account, or it's summer and they know they shouldn't be binge watching. Okay? So huge improvement in the service as measured by delight. I'm going to share with you the opposite, which is the cancel rate. So in this test, it improved the experience just a little. It was actually surprisingly small. So in this perfect experience, only 4.45% canceled, whereas the rest of the folks canceled at 4.5%. So there was a surprisingly small difference, but there was a difference. And now I'm going to talk about how we thought of this balancing act between delight and margin. In this, if we rolled it out to all, we would save 5,000 customers. That's what would happen if we pushed the test to all. And that was worth $1 million to us. The derivation of that is the 5,000 customers that you saved times $100 lifetime value times 2. And the reason that we did it times 2, it was a word of mouth factor. The guess was that Michael Hart would rave about the service a little bit more, and then would bring in his friend Uri, and that was a free customer to us. And that 2x was the word of mouth factor. Now, on the other side of this balancing act, we had to buy a lot of expensive new release. They cost us about $3 to send back and forth to customers, and that cost us $5 million. So spend $5 million to create $1 million of value. So should we launch the new release test to all or not? It's a very simple question. Don't overthink this one, because I'm going to twist your brain a little later. All right, so everyone, okay. Most are saying do not launch. Can someone tell me why you might argue that you should launch this? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So a company, you can switch back. Thank you. A company like Amazon often argues that word of mouth factor isn't 2x, it's 8x. Like in this math, if you actually brought in 8 customers because of that one raving customer, the math would support it. Now, back then, I will tell you, our CFO hated just the multiplier of 2. And the reality is we just didn't have the money at the time to explore the avenue in that way. And so we did not launch to all. So that other notion, remember this disaster of going from $3.5 billion to only $350 million. The other notion is hard to copy. So H.B. Mock was the product manager at the time. This was his work. His job was to help people, potential new members, click on that red Start Now button and enjoy the service. And he substantially improved this experience by putting a happy family on the couch. And I said, hey, that's great, HB. Fantastic. But I'd like you to do things like this that are also wicked hard to copy. Because I'm going to bet you good money that within a month, our dear friends at Blockbuster are going to have a happy family on the couch, right? And this is the importance of doing the work that we do in hard to copy ways. So I want you to think for a moment about what are all the things that are hard to copy about Netflix. If I gave you $10 million to create a startup to compete with Netflix, what are the things that would make it hard to do that? What is hard to copy about what Netflix does? Brand. They've got a brand. This is the first time I've ever heard that first from product people. The brand, everybody trusts. They know the Netflix Red. You're all handing over your credit card. Amazing. Hard to copy. What else is hard to copy? Yeah, I've heard two things. I heard network effect and content. So let's do the content. They've got a lot of it, a lot of original content, and they can afford that because they have a huge economy of scale. So today they've got 130 odd million members paying. They spend $8 billion on original content this year. And poor Amazon could only spend $3 billion. And poor Hulu was only at $2 billion. And that's because of this huge economy of scale. And I heard the network effect. And what exactly is the network effect that Netflix has today? Okay, that's to the economy of scale. Where do you watch Netflix? Everywhere. Every TV in the world is wired to let you stream Netflix. Every device. There's essentially a huge device ecosystem. Anything else hard to copy about Netflix? Oh, personalized content. Thank you. Wonderfully unique technology that's hard to copy. They know the member tastes of really 300 million people in the world. You know, and poor Hulu, not so many. All right, so there's hard to copy things. I put up a kind of bizarre last thing. It's called counter positioning. I'm just going to share with you what it looks like because I just find it really cool. Remember HB? My argument that this was not hard to copy? He added 3 words, no late fees. At the time, we were competing with Blockbuster. Half of Blockbuster's business and all of their margin came from late fees. Do you remember those bastards? Okay. So when HB did this, Blockbuster couldn't respond. They could not do this. And this is the notion of counter-positioning, which I think is way cool. All right, so then this DHM model, think about all the ways that Netflix could delight you in these hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways. And these were all the high-level theories and hypotheses about over time. It's really, these were experimented with over the course of 10 years. And I want you to think for a moment, what percent of time did Netflix get it right? Did they get it right 80%, 20%, 50%? Do you have guesses? Now you're all looking at the list. Which of those worked? Well, I'll show you. About half the time. Half the time. And this is one of the secrets of Netflix. It's basically high cadence failure, but huge learnings from each. Michael Hart is in the room. He worked on Friends and the Open API. 2 reds. One of those had a happy ending. Yeah. So Friends, the theory was that you would love to get movie ideas from your friends. It would create a hard-to-copy network effect. You wouldn't cancel or leave because your friends were there. And we pounded on this idea for 3 or 4 years and discovered 2 little problems. I mean, by the way, this works in music. It works like everywhere. It's certainly, Facebook's made everything social. And there were really 2 problems with our effort. The first is your friends have sucky movie tastes. Okay? And the second, you don't really want to share everything that you're watching. And that was 3 years of experimentation. Michael brought up, we opened up the APIs to let 1,000 flowers bloom, and none bloomed. However, 2 of those experiments, those failures, we actually experimented with exclusive content via Red Envelope Studio in 2007, and it worked great by 2013 with House of Cards because of that economy of scale. And then, Michael, you should feel better. It was the work of the open APIs that made the device ecosystem happen. And that was obviously wonderfully successful. So if I want to look smart, these are the things in the long term that work. These are the key strategies that we did pound on to delight customers in these hard to copy margin enhancing ways. And at any moment in time, we had projects. I call them tactics. And each of those was lined up against the strategies that you see on the left. And the other thing that we were maniacal about was working to see if these strategies were working. We had a variety of proxy metrics, ways that we could measure whether, in fact, we were making progress on these key strategies. I'll give you a clue. Retention is really hard to move, really hard to prove that you're moving it. So we were very reliant on a set of proxy metrics to see if we were making progress. And I'll share more in depth when I get into the personalization. So chapter 2, Reed's fancy word for consumer science was really the experimental method. Form a hypothesis, experiment, have the data, have the results, and then apply human judgment to figure out what's right. And I appreciate that we're still needed. We're not totally put out of business by machine learning. I think it will happen. At least it'll put me out of business. And at Netflix, the big dog was developing consumer insight. You know, in the early days, we guessed right about half the time. And over time, through lots of learning, maybe we guessed right 70% of the time. And that consumer insight came from existing data. So when I first showed up at Netflix, I was presented on a Monday morning with the e-staff metrics, 50 metrics that describe the business and 50 metrics that describe customer behavior. And I learned a lot really fast. And then I was expected to sit there and ask questions for hours and notice why P2 greater than or equal to 50 dropped by 3 points in a week. It was a great introduction to learning. Qualitative is the voice of the customer, doing focus groups, trying to understand the reason why people don't like poor friends, why we had to kill their friends. Surveys, I already did one, the Net Promoter Survey at the beginning. We were always looking at cancel survey, understanding why people canceled. You might remember getting emails asking, did you get your disk on time, or the quality of the encryption for a stream. But the big dog at Netflix, the only way that we could really measure the balance between delight and measure and margin was essentially A/B testing. So this is what Netflix looked like in 2005. And I'm going to take you on this journey of personalization, but I want you to notice that it really isn't personalized. Okay? In fact, it's promoting these expensive new releases on the homepage. And then I want you to notice the one tab that's called recommendations. And I'll tell you right now that one of the pieces of learning, that's a lousy word to use. That it's not how you talk to humans. You don't recommend that somebody go have coffee with someone. You think, hey, you might like to meet that person, or you might suggest they get together, but you don't recommend stuff like this. And then personalization, this is one of the pods, one of the swim lanes, I call them at Netflix. We had a strategy, and the strategy was as follows. We were going to collect as much explicit data about your movie tastes, largely through star ratings. And we also understood that over time, we would understand some of the implicit data. You watched, you streamed something for 10 minutes and then quit. That's a signal. Or you got all the way through. That's a signal. And the idea was we'd get to know your movie tastes. We'd get to know all the data we could about the movies, and then we'd magically connect them through these matching algorithms and these different presentation layer tactics. And there was a fourth idea, which is over time, the movies that we recommended to you and that you watched, you would appreciate them more. The average movie rating of the stuff that you would watch would go up over time, and because of that, your retention would improve. These were the four strategies, and at any moment in time, we were pounding on these different projects or tactics. And these changed over time with a strong linkage to the strategy on the left. And then, of course, we were evaluating whether or not we were making progress using these different proxy metrics. And so in this journey, I'm going to share some of these results and learnings from these different projects, and we'll look at the metrics and how we decided if something was working or not. Look at the site. It looks a little, oh, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I got a magic elf in the front row. The question I'm going to ask, the proxy metric for personalization is what percentage of customers rate at least 50 movies in their first 6 weeks with the service? That's the question I'm going to ask. And I want you to think about it. But this was our proxy metric. The idea was that if you rated a bunch of movies, it must be because you appreciate the result. And this was our proxy for understanding if you valued personalization. This is when I learned about the extent to which I've got youthful optimists and curmudgeons in a room. Okay, Ure, I'm ready. And I've learned that the room is full of skeptics. It's called signaling. Yeah, somebody's going crazy. All right, you guys want to know the answer, huh? We got it up to into the high 20s. Okay? And I'll show you why. You want to switch back, Uri, sorry. I want you to look carefully at that little tab that says Movies You'll Heart. And the designers used a technical design term on me. They said, Gib, that is fugly, which I think is funky plus ugly, but someone here can help me. But that's the Movies You'll Heart tab, and that turned out to be fairly important. So I'm going to show you the data. You can see that metric going up and to the right over the years. So the youthful optimists, the few of you in the room, were right. And what was going on was that little Movies You'll Heart tab got clicked on a lot. And folks would come to this thing that we called the ratings wizard. This was the invention of a device. People would come here and go on ratings jags. And it was the job of the ratings wizard to surface lots of movies that you likely watched in the past. And folks went crazy. And this is where we got all of the explicit taste data that we fed into the algorithms over time. So this is my family. That's Kristen, 55, Kelsey, 23, Brittany, 21, me, an awkward 56. And the question I want you thinking about, well, will it help predict your movie taste to understand your age and gender? That's the question that I have of you now. It's just kind of fun to watch. So most people think it will. Yeah, and you're thinking, probably not. So the answer is no, it didn't help. Huh, well, that's interesting. Movie tastes are wonderfully unique. What's more helpful is to know just a couple of titles that you like. And that's an important insight as you get into personalization in the realm of movies. And here's the data. So we had something called RMSE, root mean square error. Dan, you with me? What are some favorite movies you have?
Star Wars.
Okay. We predicted Dan would like Star Wars 5 stars, and he rated it 5 stars. Rock on. Give me another one.
Runner.
Okay. We predicted that Dan would love Blade Runner 5 stars, and he rated it fantastic. We were perfect. So this is one of those metrics. If you predict perfectly, it's down and to the right is a good thing. And RMSE was measuring this difference. And we added age and gender to the algorithms, and it did not help to predict Dan or anyone's taste. And that's how we knew that demographics were not helpful. The big dog for us in the early days with algorithms, this is the quackle, the QAD confirmation layer. If you added a title to your queue, in this case, someone has added Icon, the collaborative filtering algorithm would suggest a bunch of other titles that it thought you would enjoy. In collaborative filtering, we know that Dan likes Star Wars and Blade Runner, and Michael Hart loves Star Wars and Blade Runner. What else do you like, Michael?
Coen Brothers.
Any Coen Brothers movie. Just pick one for me.
Oh, brother, where?
Oh, I remember a movie guy there. Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou? Because of that, we believe that Dan's going to love Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou as well. And that's how collaborative filtering works, but with the data from hundreds of millions of folks. And this actually generated 20% of our Q ads. So it was a very successful way to help connect people with movies you'll love, this Quackle. And we only had one problem, which is we had one engineer working on it. His name was Stan Lanning, and we needed more. So what we did was we did the Netflix prize. Does anybody remember the Netflix prize? Okay. So we said we'd give $1 million to any engineer outside the building who could improve RMSE by at least 10%. And we had about 10,000 engineers working on the problem within a few months. It was amazing. And every year we paid a $50,000 progress prize to anybody at the top of this leaderboard. And then eventually we paid out the $1 million. But you could see one of the insights from the experiments just by looking at the names of the teams. So I want you to notice ranked 4 is a team that's called Opera Solutions and Vandelay United. Okay, we know there's some Seinfeld fans on the team, but the title, their team name is wonky. And what was going on was when teams realized they weren't going to be top of the list, they looked to the other teams and said, let's combine all of our algorithms together and maybe we'll bump to first. And so one of the key insights was the more algorithms that you combine, the better. Now, the other algorithm was that all movie ratings were not equally valuable. So all of those movie ratings that were collected from the ratings wizard that were largely from titles that you watched before you were with the service, those were not as valuable as the ones that you watch, while part of the service. So those are just 2 insights in the first 2 years. And then we paid out the $1 million. 10% better. And the question is, when we A/B tested this shiny new algorithm, does 10% better job of predicting your movie taste, will it improve retention? Oh, it's a horse race. It's a horse race. It's so funny. You were all curmudgeons and skeptics early, and now you're getting slightly more hopeful, which I guess I appreciate. Huh. Yeah, we're measuring collective wisdom. I would say we were wrong most of the time, right? This is hard stuff. Okay, so the answer is it didn't help. Okay? No, I will, I'm sorry, engineers. But I will say something, which is it was a combination of work by engineers and the presentation layer work from designers. Those two, when you combine them, good things happen. So we needed both engineers and designers. So we now know that it's that combination of the coding and what you see. And we also know that the more algorithms, the better. And so our dear friends Pandora on the other side of the bay, they had engaged in some of these activities in the Netflix prize. And if you remember them, they had something called the Music Genome Project. So they had 50 musicologists who would tag the attributes of all these different songs. So a Jack Johnson song is slow, bluesy, acoustic, guitar, surfer dude, outdoorsy music for awkward 56-year-old males. Okay, and we tried a similar experiment. We got movie-cologists down in LA. It was a great job. You 50 of them were watching movies all the time at work. And then they were tagging different attributes of the movies. And this was called the category interest algorithm. And in this case, because Gib was interested in airplane, the algorithm thought that I'd also enjoy Ferris Bueller's Day Off and The Breakfast Clubs, which are all cult comedies from the 1980s. For the first time, we're providing context for why you'll like a movie. And this improved watching and even retention in the long term, which is really wonderful. And these are all insights that came out of that Netflix prize experiment. Crystal Chenkuti, her job was to make it really easy for you to add DVDs to your queue. And the metric was the percentage of members who added at least 6 DVDs a month to their queue. And you can see things were good for Crystal. She drove from 50 all the way up to 75 or so. And then things went south in 2000, 2009, 2010. What happened? Yeah, that bastard Brent Avery, his job was to promote streaming, and his metric was the percentage of members who watched at least 15 minutes in a month. It was the shortest TV episode, the shortest increment of value. And you can see things are going up and to the right for Brent. And around 2010, the company is all of a sudden turning from a DVD by mail into a streaming service. And you no longer need to have that integration with post office, DVD by mail, et cetera. And now Netflix can become an international company, which is really incredibly exciting. So the next question is, now Netflix is in France, right? And the question is it helpful to know that you're French and that you live in France? And I hope that the screen has French language on it. Yes, thank you. Okay, so how many of you believe it's helpful to know you're French and you live in France? And again, we've got collective wisdom for us. And again, it's running in the wrong direction. So, gosh, this is incredible. Movie tastes are incredibly unique. It's more helpful to know a few titles and how you feel about it than it is to know that you're French or you live in France. Really remarkable. And these are the things you can only learn through this consumer science process. So, that dear company, Facebook, they were an international company for years before Netflix crossed the border. And they invented this very light gesture, thumbs up, thumbs down. Netflix has poured their heart and soul and collected billions of ratings on a 0 to 5 scale. And the rest of the world is used to this really simple gesture. Netflix tests it, and they get twice as much ratings with the simple thumbs up and thumbs down. Poor stars, okay? The stars are gone. Remember that fourth high-level strategy, that theory that over time, if the average rating of the movies that you watched improved, that would improve your retention. And there was no data, no evidence to suggest that, which is really a mystery. And it drove lots of people crazy, but it also drove people sort of back to the drawing board, spending time in focus groups, in qual, and survey, trying to understand what the heck is going on. And some really remarkable insight here. So if we asked John what his favorite movie is, he might say it's Hotel Rwanda. He might even say he spends most of his life watching intellectual documentaries about saving the earth. Okay? He would never reveal what he really watches. And this gives the clue. The clue was that we thought high star ratings was the name of the game. And the idea was actually maybe that doesn't help us to understand whether you enjoy movies or enjoy the service. And so the phenomenon we discovered was that people really, really, really love these leave your brains at the door movies. Paul Blart Mall Cop. Very enjoyable. Now, we don't talk about it on Monday mornings when we get back to work, right? We don't talk about it at the water cooler. And in fact, we give it 3 stars. But we stay with the service in order to watch this stuff. In fact, Paul Blart Mall Cop is so freaking good that you had to do Mall Cop 2. Okay? And then let me just blow your mind away. Some of the big investments in original content, the early ones, there was a 6-picture deal with Adam Sandler, okay? One of the movies was called The Ridiculous Six, and I read a critic's review recently. It said, if 100 Ways to Die in the West was too intellectually stimulating for you, you'll love The Ridiculous Six, okay? But this gave you a clue about how important movie enjoyment was, and very separate from these high star ratings. So if you look carefully today, Casino is a 98% match for me. It doesn't say anything about the quality of the movie. It's just simply suggesting that I'm going to love watching it. So the stars are gone, and then there's this thing that indicates whether or not you will enjoy something. So the way Netflix works today is there is an ordered list for me. There's a title at the top, number 1. There's a title at the bottom, might be 10,000. And I love the stuff on the top and stuff on the bottom. And then there's lots of filters. So there's a way to filter all the action adventure movies that Gib will love, or the popular new releases, all of these things. And there's this wonderful row system. And it's replicated on a PC, on different game systems, on your Apple TV, on your phone, etc. So you see these rows all over. And you'll notice here, when I come to my laptop, the first row there is recently added. And then if you scroll down the page a little bit, you'll see that there's something called Trending Now. Now, I'm going to give you a little secret. Trending Now is personalized for me. So if you compare it to your friends, you'll see something radically different. And then you see Continue Watching for Gibson, and this is the moment when I realize I'm revealing way too much about my movie tastes. And look at the rows. So here's the big controversy that happened. We all learn from a design point of view, it's super important to keep things simple, and it's super important to keep things consistent. So that every time I come back, the first thing I see should be that recently added. And it would be heretical to switch it every time I come back, or to switch it what you see on my iPhone versus the TV. And my last pop quiz is, should the overall site structure be personalized? Should we let the rows free, not be consistent? That every time you come back, it might be different. It might be different for every member of the household. It might be different on your PC versus your iPhone versus your Apple TV. And by the way, this was a very controversial idea from a relatively new product manager that said, I think you guys are all dopes. Like, free the rows, let them float. Oh my gosh, it's 50-50. Wow. So this punk product manager who just tipped the vote favor was right. So if you look, these rows are not consistent. They're different for each member of the family. They're different each time you come back. They're different on every device. And really, the algorithm's just trying to brew the rows that it thinks will be best for you at that moment in time, the top. And so in this case, a personalized site structure is helpful to inspire more watching. All right, so today, Netflix is on all devices. There's lots of original content because of that economy of scale. It's wonderfully personalized, and you can still see those there's a row of movies called Movies Based on Real Life, or Because, Gib, You Watched Orange is the New Black. It's wonderfully simple, and then it's instant. So these theories have worked and played out over time. And what I really love about personalization in the long term is it's consistently delighted you, helping you find stuff that you love in these hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways. It's wicked hard to copy, this system. It's remarkable the extent to which Netflix can predict your taste. In the old days of DVDs, it was all about making it easy to find 1 or 10 or 20 titles among 100,000 choices. Today, what's really cool with Netflix, with original content, all they're doing is trying to predict how many hours of watching will happen. And they're just trying to right-size the amount of investment they make in original content against their best guess at the number of people who enjoy it. How many folks have watched Stranger Things? Right. So the guess was 100 million people will enjoy it. Because of that, they could spend $500 million. They right-sized the investment. How many folks have enjoyed BoJack Horseman? Because of those 2 million viewers, Netflix could afford to spend $10 million. And it's wonderful. If you look at the 23 Emmys that Netflix won, they tied HBO this year. It's all these micro niches. It's these pockets of stuff for all of us with our own wonderful, unique taste. How many are into watching Everest climbing documentaries? Okay, good. We'll see you afterwards. But that's really the name of the game. All right, so I said I would bring it home for you with a problem that Netflix would like you to solve. So this is the new member page today. There's no happy family on the couch. It's wonderfully simple because the brand carries so much meaning for you today. And you know and you trust. Someone clicks on the red button, they enter their credit card information, and they're streaming for a month. And then the company hits your credit card. That's the way it works. A bright customer service person said, we're answering a lot of phone calls from people on day 31, 32, 33 saying, hey, I forgot. Can you back me out of the service? And they said, sure, no biggie. $10 million worth of phone calls a year. And so the person said, gosh, why don't you test this? And so the test was get aggressive about a text reminder, an email, a personalized homepage saying, your free trial period is about to end. So now I'm going to give you a little bit of existing data. I'll have you guess for a moment. If 100 people visit this site, what percent hit the red button and hand over a credit card to start their free trial? Anybody want to guess? It's between 0 and 100. 40. What else? 80. 15. Yeah, you guys are all wonderfully optimistic, which I appreciate. And this number is surprisingly low because it's 2%. Okay? Now bear with me. The next question is, what percent at the end of the free trial converts into paid membership? 80, 90. The answer is 90. It's wonderfully high, right? So these are important data points to think about as we get into this test. The real key one is that month one retention. Worth testing, correct? Let's get aggressive. Let's shut down those phone calls. Let people know. Feels like the right thing to do. Do you think people will notice? How many believe that this is going to change month one retention? Because the main thing with A/B testing is half the time really nothing happens, right? I mean, it's a little frustrating, but it's true, okay? Okay, so a handful of you believe that this is going to change customer behavior. Let me see the hands. Okay, I'm dragging a few with us, and I'm seeing the head nod. Okay, so the answer is it does change customer behavior. Month one retention drops from 90% to 85%. You chase some folks out of the system, right? Congratulations, product manager. You've just lost the company $60 million. Except we'll back out the 10 million because we're not answering the phone calls anymore. So we know the margin story here, that we're going to lose $50 million. Now I want you to think about that model of delighting customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. Think for a minute about delight. How might you feel if you got this aggressive notice that you should cancel because your free trial is about to end? How do you guys think about Netflix as a company if you learn that maybe they did this? Does that make you feel better about the company? Do you guys think there's some delight in this? Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of head nods and the hands are going up. All right, so we have some real delight. What's hard to copy in this model? Giving away money is hard to copy. What else? Why would you give away the money? For trust. And what's trust about? It's all about the brand. So the hard to copy thing here is the brand. So we've got this potential delight. We actually don't know what's going to happen. Those customers got chased out. They might be so delighted. Maybe it was summer and they don't want to binge watch. Maybe they come back. Maybe they tell their friends, this is remarkable. And the real thing is building that relationship of trust with everybody. All right, got some delight. We've got some hard to copy brand, and we're losing $50 million. Big fight, big debate. How does the CFO think about this? Not good, right? How does the marketing head feel about this? Ooh, I got some not goods, and maybe they feel good. There's a big debate. And who makes the decision at Netflix on something like this? I heard a lot of mumbling. the customers. We have the customer data. So they've informed this decision already. Who else? The CEO. Yeah, the product manager. The CEO is kind of like, whatever. No, that's not true at all. Exceptionally bright. But the product manager is wicked close to the problem. So in this case, it was Tom Willer. He gets to make the decision. Okay, so you're all Tom Willer. You ready? So you guys tell me, what should Netflix do? I need to know. There is no right answer here, by the way. Apply your human judgment and tell me what Tom Willer should do, and I'm very curious to learn what you think. Oh, I'm loving it. Loving it. Wow. It's a total flip of what Netflix had to do back in the DVD days. They had no freaking money. They couldn't afford it. But you guys are saying, well, they can afford it now, right? And it's delightful, and it builds this hard-to-copy brand. And, well, maybe at this point in the company's life, they can afford to lose $50 million. Maybe it's the right thing to do. Oh, you're so curious. Let's switch back. Tom Willerer. He launched it all. He did it. Pretty impressive, right? Now, I want to repeat, again, that the company's bigger and they can afford to do it. Because I get a lot of startup CEOs that get really mad with me about this case, okay? So it is a little bit different. But let me go over the learnings here. In this case, the delight, the value of that delight trumps the margin. This was really doubling or tripling down on delight, which Netflix consistently does today. And there's a cost of ethics, of doing the right thing and of building a great brand. In this case, it's exactly $50 million. And then Tom had some remarkable insight, which is he viewed this as a low-stakes decision. He hit a button to roll out to all, but he knew at any moment he could reverse it. No biggie. And most of us as humans, we belabor decisions. But any case where it's reversible, then we shouldn't worry and spend as much time deliberating. You can spend as much time as you did on hitting that button. That's okay. Well, maybe I got some startups in trouble again. Sorry. The other thing, Tom thought that this was a low-stakes decision because it was losing $50 million for a company that's revenues are $8 billion today. And so that was some of the insight that he brought to it. And the other thing is I'm helping you learn a little bit about the culture of Netflix. There was a fervent debate. Tom decided, and then those people that thought he was an idiot magically lined up behind him in support of him. And they all did together. There's just wonderful and remarkable business maturity at Netflix. All right, so there's 3 more things that you need to do to build a great company. The first is you need some courage. So it took Netflix 30 minutes to make the decision to spend $100 million to do their first original content, House of Cards. It took Netflix a day to cut Kevin Spacey and season 7 from the mix because of the sexual harassment of a teenage boy. One day. A lot of courage on both sides of that equation. Most startups are born because they took on a lot of risk, and as they grow up, they start to play it safe. And you want to maintain your risk profile over time if you want to become a great company. And Netflix does that. This will make you feel better about life. It requires time. It requires patience. It only takes 20 years to build a great company. Right? It's hard. It's hard, Michael, correct? Yes, very hard. I want you to observe some other little thing. You see what's happening just before 2012? Anybody remember what happened then? Quickster. And that was the moment the company was worth $40 billion and Kelsey was going to go to college and maybe even medical school. And then a week later, she wasn't. Okay? Because it dropped to $10 billion. And it was the Quickster decision to separate the DVD by mail business from the streaming business. You were all expected to go to 2 different websites. You were also expected to tolerate a 30% price increase on both sides of the equation. And all heck broke loose. Which brings me to the third thing. So if you ask Reed what happened, he said, listen, we made a lot of good calls, But in this case, we failed to obsess over the customer, and we were overconfident. We lost our humility. There's also just a wonderful parody of Reed and Andy Rendich, who was the Quickster dude. He was the CEO of Quickster, a public CEO for 1 week. And he got lampooned on Saturday Night Live, which it was painful. How did that feel, Andy? Not going to lie, my kids thought it was funny. All right. So I work with lots of companies, lots of different startups. And if I'm trying to understand whether they're obsessed, I'm really looking for 5 things. The other way you can think about it is if you want to take some next steps in action to become a customer-obsessed company, here are the 5 things that I would nicely encourage you to do. The first, it's that existing data, the strong data focus, the existing data that will help you to understand both customer and business behavior. The second is all that voice of customer work. Are you meeting with customers at least a month? And are you meeting with customers outside of Silicon Valley? Because everybody who lives here is a freak. Okay? Do you understand why of behavior? Do you understand why they love 3-star movies? The survey data. So do you have ways of understanding what's going on with your customers? Do you have the cancel data? Why did they cancel that month? Do you have ways of assessing the quality of their work? Do you have Net Promoter Score, which for a startup is a wonderful way of evaluating product market fit? Very fast, very easy. And then the big dog, as you grow up, really the only way that I found to understand the balancing act between delight and margin, do you have the A/B test infrastructure? And the last, and every company can have this, doesn't matter their size, do you have a strategy? Do you have a set of theories and hypotheses that will help you to make guesses about, in the long term, how you will delight customers in these hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways? Those are the things that I look for. For me, customer obsession is putting the customer at the center of everything you do to delight customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways to invent a better future. With that, I'd like to say thank you. So I've got some awkward stuff to do. You guys have all seen street performers do their thing? And then there's the moment that they pass the hat and everybody leaves. I'm not passing a hat for money. All I would like is some feedback, okay? I'm obsessed. So you can, if you are on an Android, you can go to gibsonbiddle.com and you'll find the survey. It's the top link. You can find a PDF and you can find an article. And all the iPhone people are like, what about me? Okay, well, here's the next experiment. I'm hoping in the first time in the history of the earth, a QR code is going to be helpful. Okay, so just hold up your camera. You don't need an app, but it should automatically take you to the SurveyMonkey link. This is cool because it looks like everybody's taking a picture of me. Woo! Did it work? It what? Oh, shit. Wait a minute. Oh, yeah. That was Dan. He switched it on me. Oh, that's funny. Well, that link is wicked important. That is funny. Okay, well, in the history of the earth, the QR code has failed to be helpful. Okay, what you can do is just go to www.gibsonbiddle.com. That is hysterical. A mouse. I'm blaming it on Slido. So go there, and it's the very top link for you. And I would just love your feedback. It's simple. 0 sucks, 10's great, any number in between. If you think of something that was good or something that could be better, it's incredibly helpful to me. All right. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have at this point.
Did you want to mention the QR code thing or no? No,
not yet. I'm not done, dude.
Oh, I see. One more thing. All right.
I'm trying to answer questions.
I got it. We're going to do Q&A now.
We're like a well-oiled machine, the two of us.
Yeah, exactly. Just like rehearsal. So if you want to ask a question, you can only ask a question if you have a mic in your hand. So if you want a mic, so you can ask a question, raise your hand. John's over there. There's 2 of us. We have 2 mics. So give an awesome talk. Who's got questions for him? All right.
They can do Slido too, right?
Right there, John. All right. Vlad.
Hi. Gib,
Hi.
this way.
Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. This is awesome.
You're very welcome. Did you do the feedback yet?
Yes, I did. Didn't work. No, okay. So
Didn't work.
let's say if you're a product manager for one of the backend systems, like you're building a catalog, and it takes a while before it gets onto the front end, and you're trying to decide a feature, and you don't have this kind of user feedback.
Yeah.
What type of recommendations or suggestions that you have for us when we are building features on the back end?
Yeah. So let me make sure I understand. You're doing work. Is your customer? Are you building tools for internal customers? That's really what I'm trying to figure out.
Yes.
Yes, that's what I was guessing. Well, so they are your customer. You can engage in qualitative. Ask them, am I focused on the right stuff? I've never really experimented with this, but some people have said try NPS to see. It depends on your situation. I think the main thing is talk with your customers. At the end of the day, make sure that you understand the problems that they're trying to solve, and then how the work that you do is going to be helpful to that. So, I mean, Michael here was an engineering partner for many years. What problem were you trying to solve initially with the APIs?
We were trying to do like a Netflix prize degree, like BizDev 2.0.
Yeah. So he understood the problem, which was we were trying to fundamentally accelerate innovation. So like the Netflix prize, we were trying to give our tools to all the developers around the world. And our hope and expectation is that we are going to create new ways that people could discover movies. He fundamentally understood the problem that we were trying to solve. He gave us the tools. And in that case, unfortunately, the experiment just didn't work. But I think it's somewhat analogous to working with the end user, which is just talk to them and make sure you understand what problem you're trying to solve, how you can improve their lives. Very analogous. Other questions?
Hey, Gib.
Sorry.
Thank you for presentation. It's so nice.
I'm so sorry about the whole QR thing. Go ahead.
It's cool when you remind us how often we are wrong. My question was regarding the last survey. So you took that hit in revenue, you start sharing, sending the notification to customers. Did it impact retention?
The truth is, what would happen is the P1 retention, I showed you that number, and P2 got worse, but you would chase those customers out of the system. So I was very quickly showing you how things played out over 6 months. But remember, some of those people you're chasing out were not, they were bad customers. Forgive me. They didn't really, they were there to enjoy a 1 month free service. So I tried to give you in a stylized ways. It was a lower LTV. It went from 172 to 170. It wasn't that big a deal. The early hit on retention was mitigated over time because retention improved because you'd gotten rid of those bad customers. That's the way of thinking about it. But at the end of the day, you just want the margin story or the LTV is what Michael was doing. We're talking in code. I'm really sorry. It's all coming back to me. Yes.
Got the mic.
Did you look at, since these people are moved?
Yes.
Hi.
Yeah.
Since these,
I just got enamored by the questions of Slido. Oh, this is exciting.
It's mesmerizing. Yeah. Since these folks are interested in movies, and there's some information there about the movie, the cast and description and all that, did you guys experiment with other information being presented there, or think about kind of that other journey, right? After you've watched a movie and you're like, wow, I love this. I want to learn more, do more. Did you ever think about extending the experience?
Totally. Okay. So zillions of experiments. I can tell you how it ended, and you'll be surprised. We experimented with lots of ideas. Like at time, IMDb. How many folks use that? Yeah. And so all of the team thought that would be great. And then we just sort of nicely reminded ourselves that we're all Silicon Valley freaks, right? And normal people across the country and the world don't need that data. So we experimented with a lot of ideas, but I'm going to tell you where things ended up. If you recall, one of the strategies was make things simple and easy. And every time we made the movie display page simpler, things got better. And so the radical endpoint is, if you look carefully, there are no reviews today on Netflix. And part of it is it's not nearly as risky. You hit a button, you start watching a movie or not. It's not as risky as deciding whether or not you're going to waste your DVD slot, and wait 2 days or whatever else. But that extension of just trying to keep things as simple and as easy as possible and not get in the way of the movie is a super important principle. I have used Amazon's X-ray stuff. I'm not a huge fan. With Xbox really, really, really wanted us to do, what was that? We would watch the same movie at the same time. What was that called? Party mode. Like, they were huge believers in that. And 2% used it, which was sort of our guess, right? But they thought 28% would use it. So generally, Netflix's idea is just stay out of the way. Storytellers they know what they're doing, and that's the experience that you want to engage in. There are some new experiments. They're doing branching storylines, so like you sort of control the story. So they are beginning to experiment today with different storytelling techniques. And you'll see more of that stuff over the next 10 or 20 years. But just generally keep things simple and easy. Let the storytellers tell their stories. Yes?
Hey there. Thank you again for sharing the talk.
You're welcome.
So what suggestions would you have for taking these same principles of the DHM and applying it to hardware, like physical things, when you can't as easily do something like an A/B test?
Great question. I'm thinking, I'm sure you're thinking too, right? Okay, well, so Netflix, we were almost a hardware company. So we spent a year on a magic box that would let you watch movies instantly on your television. And we knew that would be delightful. We also had the survey data that people were going to buy it. And we actually did a painted door test. Like, you would click on a button on the site because we said, for $50, we'll give you a magic box that connects to your TV. You'll watch movies instantly. This is before you could do it. And we had an incredibly high take rate on that. The margin enhancing story was reasonable. So I'm now about to tell you the founding story for Roku. A month before we launched, we stopped the project. And the real reason was because our investors wouldn't tolerate us going into a low margin business, into the hardware business. And then the second, we were trying to build this device ecosystem, and none of our partners believed that we wouldn't try to take advantage of our first position of having all of this inside our knowledge. So in that case, we knew we could delight customers. The margin story we thought would work, but strategically, it was exactly the wrong thing to do. So I'm sort of applying the model. You had something to add?
Where's Roku money today?
Well, that's a rhetorical question, but Michael's question is, how does Roku make their money today? And the answer is?
Advertising.
Yeah. So they're applying the model. And they did go public in the last year. Yeah, it's sort of a happy ending. They did not, the team, there were 100 people we threw out of the building. It was not their aspiration to be a little punk hardware company that would go public 12 years later. They were joining Netflix at that time. But they recovered slowly. Other questions? Yeah.
Hi, Gib. Thank you so much for the time. First, I want to know, like, if you are running a company and a startup especially, normally you have a small team, limited resources, right?
Well, that is, how many of you feel you have limited resources? Yeah. Okay. I understand your problem.
Yeah. So normally when you are trying to do A/B testing, you need to know, you need to define what is going to be first, right? And I don't know if you can run different A/B testing at the same time, or do you prefer to just start measuring one at a time and keep improving this specific KPI?
Yeah, so today I'm sure there's 500 A/B tests that are going in parallel on A/B tests. I mean, something in that neighborhood. Okay, so think about at Netflix, I shared with you the personalization story. That was Todd Yellen's swim lane. And so at any moment in time, he was trying to answer the question, how do I improve retention? Or in the short term, how do I improve that proxy metric, the P2 greater than equal to 50? And so he was always doing a priority. What are the things that are most likely to move that metric? And what are the things that are going to be the easiest to do, that consume the least resource? And he was just using his judgment. He had 8 presentation layer engineer and 2 designers and probably 40 back-end engineers. And he was just trying to keep the most important, the best guesses at the top of the list. And there were probably 8 or 10 other swim lanes that were thinking the same way, very independent of each other. I'm just doing a basic prioritization model right now. Early on, the key question is startups. You don't have enough people coming to the system. You don't have the A/B test infrastructure. My coaching is to use those other resources. Have the existing data, do qual, have a strategy, and do as much survey work as you can. And then over time, you'll get to the A/B testing. But you can get a lot of insight from those 4 other sources. Yeah. Hiya.
How did for the story you told on the algorithm contest, and then in the end you learned that it didn't help without design.
Yeah.
Those types of hypotheses seem to take a while to prove out.
Yes.
Like maybe even over a year.
Yes.
How did you train the organization to have that kind of patience to wait that long for a result that validated that was the right strategy?
That's a great question. So my short answer is proxy metrics. So think about the improvement of our MSE over time, the down to the right. That gave people hope and a sense of progress. And then over time, people began to just understand that this is hard, what we're trying to do, and it takes a long time. But it was the proxy metrics that always gave us the hope. I'll tell you one thing funny about the Netflix prize, or maybe encouraging. That was the single biggest recruiting tool that we had. Before the Netflix prize, Netflix was not a cool company to work for. It was like just an e-commerce company, and after it, all of a sudden, it was a cool place for engineers to go. So it was a very happy result out of that failure. And we were all trained in patience. Like, okay, this didn't work, but maybe the next thing will. And the other thing, Michael was a peer there. Like, there were people who were in their 30s and 40s. We were all on our second and third startup. We were reflecting on all our failures. So just a lot of business maturity, and because of that, a lot of patience. Yeah.
I mean, after leaving Netflix, I've been through startups and different companies and trying to get to that experimentation culture at Netflix. And it can be really hard to get people to the point where they're willing to invest in those kind of tests. And I see it's almost like a little chasm. You got to get people over. And there was one phrase I've heard once that really resonates with me is you have to get to the point where you've been humbled by the data. And organizationally, leadership endorses that failure and the learning experience that goes along with it. And I think until you go through that, it's really hard to get there. So you got to have a big force of will to kind of get those first learning experiences and have an endorsement from top level execs to make that transition.
You want to share your battle scars, Pedro?
I have plenty. I have been happy to say
The
that
mic.
I've been humbled by data many times.
It's the same story.
Yeah, so I have been, I did learn the hard way. I was very shy and afraid of that first learning as well. So I kind of, I had some reluctance to go through that process and afraid of the first failure, if you will. So I think it actually helped me back a bit. But I did have some phenomenal failures that I've learned from.
Yes.
So I was just curious, you were saying earlier that you let the storytellers do their thing, which I think is amazing. So giving them the creative freedom.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, like for shows that have multiple seasons, how much of the data that is collected by how viewers are watching, like say season 1, is passed on to the storytellers to say, okay, this is what actually people paid attention to, and then trying to like, where do you draw the line between what Netflix has learned from data to the creative freedom of the person who's trying to tell the story?
Okay. So I'm not there. These guys aren't here. This is what I believe. So reads the CEO, but I think it's throughout the content team. They're trying to stay hands off with the storytellers. I talked about what does happen, making the guesses about what's the right level of investment. So that is an important thing. And what they say is today it's about sort of 70% intuition and 30% data. So it's early days is the way they describe it. And they're trying to stay out of the creative process. My guess, maybe they're sharing some information like what you said to the creatives, but it's just information, and they're not trying to tell them what to do or not to do. And then I'm sure a lot of decisions are straightforward. If you see half the watching, from season 2 to season 3, maybe time is up. So basic insights like that. But at the end of the day, the platform that Netflix is focused on today is they want every creative in the world to tell stories for Netflix. And there can be a huge potential network effect in that, which is really amazing. I mean, I was blown away that Netflix is now sort of on the same playing field as HBO. And I don't perceive that HBO is on the same playing field as Netflix when it comes to streaming and technology. So I think I know how this movie is going to end. So,
I think you've mentioned a lot about the proxy metrics. Is there any suggestions in terms of making sure that you have the right metric and you're not making mistakes with it? Because just an example, for Netflix, you could have easily measured the wrong thing by going after visitors per show rather than shows watched per visitor. So it's very two different things.
Yeah.
But you can optimize wrong things.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you some surprises. Things move pretty quickly at Netflix, except when you got into these proxy discussions. So it's hard. So you're looking for a proxy metric that you hope, first, that you can capture it. Second, you can actually move it. And third, it correlates with retention. And last, if you actually move it, it will improve retention. So some of these debates lasted 9 months, and just trying and looking at the data. So I'm commiserating with you and saying it's hard. There's some others that were a little easier. The Friends metric was percentage of Netflix members who engaged at least one friend in their network. And unfortunately, that sort of started at 2 or 3% and grew up to maybe 6 or 7%, which was a signal that it wasn't going to work in the long term, and certainly helpful. So all of these proxy metrics, is there a customer value, and can you move it, and will it correlate to retention, and will it move retention in the long term? And those are all hard questions to answer, and because of it takes lots of time and lots of debate. Hi.
Hi, I'm Chrissy.
Hello, Chrissy.
Hi, thanks for your talk. So I feel like the delight versus margin balance, I kind of followed the story there, where ideally you would delight your customer and also make margins. And maybe at the beginning, when you're a smaller company, you can't really take the risk on the margin, but later you can, et cetera. But with that hardware question,
I think you should present instead of me.
That hardware question kind of threw a curveball. In there is what I felt like, because then it was like, oh, we had both delight and margin, but it didn't align with strategy, so we dropped out of that one.
That happens all the time. So you're correct.
So could you speak more on that and how strategy fits in? Does strategy always lead? That sort of thing.
Okay. I'll give you 2 examples of that. So Netflix, we circa 2005, 6, 7, we weren't sure how to make money. That was the margin story was really hard. So we experimented with something. We said we'll put an ad banner at the top of every page. And half of my team's revolted, we can't put advertising on a subscription-based service. We A/B tested it, and did it hurt retention? No, it didn't. And it was $40 million positive in margin, which was really helpful at the time. And then we killed it 3 years later. And the reason was we wanted to focus on the one thing that we could get great at, because we were never going to be the best at advertising. So this was a strategic decision to focus on personalization and let Google do its thing in advertising. So positive margin, but off strategy, defocusing to the company. So this is why human judgment's needed. And this is why I am an advocate of at least having a strategy so you can talk about these things. Another one, we sold all of our used discs. So you could buy that expensive new release 6 months later because we didn't need it anymore. And so we were selling a lot of discs, like 5% of our customers. But in that case, we figured out how to make money eventually. The real insight was having $10 and $15 plans instead of $22 plans. But we killed previously viewed sales because it was getting in the way of creating a simple experience. That was sort of informed by the brand. We were just about movie enjoyment made easy, and we didn't want to seem like this website that was hawking its wares left and right. So yeah, strategy is part of the equation. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Neong. Thank you for your presentation. That was very useful. You mentioned earlier that you said that every morning you read over like 50 metrics. 50
it was actually every Monday morning.
Every Monday morning. 50 operational metrics, 50 financial metrics. I'm just curious, like what happens when those metrics are they contradict each other? So for example, you run an A/B test on that optimizes for customer delight, but there's some components of customer delight go up, some components of customer delight go down. So retention, dwell time on the screen increases, but the number of a 7-day return number of visits goes down, something like that. So what do you do in this case? Do you have like a North Star metric that you look at? That's 1 second. When you look at the social component of Netflix, have you tried measuring like the impact of network effects? So like whether it's through like how much does one person recommending Netflix to another person increase the person's lifetime value or increase the downloads from the person?
So let me tell you the real value of these eStaff metrics. It was all the questions that you just brought up and the intellectual curiosity and the drive to try to understand the questions that you brought up. So I will give you an example. We were surprised that suddenly folks in Hawaii were retaining a lot better. Like, what's going on here? You'd see like Hawaii retention is excellent. Like, what the heck's going on? And it turned out, for a variety of reasons, they were getting their discs fundamentally faster. And that was a clue that gosh, if we could get all of the members the discs the next day in the mail, that would improve retention. And that happened. So we had a proxy metric that said percentage of the time that the disc at the top of your queue arrives next day in mail. That started at 60%. We drove it all the way up to 95%, and that improved retention. And that was from the kind of conversation you just brought up, and that was the real value. But there were tons of mysteries in the data, just as you suggested. North Star was all about retention. But a lot of our little clues about what really might create a better service came from these little anomalies. And they happen like every month or two. And there was incredible intellectual curiosity to understand everything you could about the existing data on both the customer and the business side. And that fueled a lot of these future hypotheses.
Well, what about the network effects? Did you guys...
So here's like Netflix intellectual curiosity. We wanted to know what the word of mouth factor was. We needed to know, is it 2? Is it 8? So we engineered a test in the state of Colorado. We said, this half of the state will do this half of the state will do the other. And it'll take me too much to explain it, but I'll put it this way. We did heavy advertising in one part of the state, and we wanted to understand what extent that people would tell about the service, and none in the other half of the state. And then something crazy happened. The side where we were doing more aggressive advertising, growth stopped, which is exactly the opposite of what we expected. And the side of the state where we were silent, like, did fine. What the heck is going on? We had engineered this test over like 6 months. It's very complicated. It turned out that Redbox had launched into the side of the state where we were doing advertising. This other factor totally confounded us. So my point here is, real life is hard. And as much as we wanted to understand this word of mouth, we really never got the answer. Yeah.
Hey, so thanks for the session. It was great. So I'm not a product guy. I do growth and marketing mostly for early stage startups. And if you are in a company where you have very limited resources and you want to hire product managers, right? And my experience is I would usually work with product managers who are very innovative, creative, and want to make great things, or product managers who can gather requirements, like get stuff done, right? So what is the right balance? And again, the answer cannot be hire one of each. That's not the answer.
Well, I'm worse. I wanted a person that can do both of those things.
But if that's not an option, so in an early stage, where would you like to invest? Like innovation, or get your stuff done, or like what is the right balance?
I can only give you a little bit more fidelity. So I wrote an article on Medium called Hacking Your Product Leader Career. I described the attributes of a product manager, the technical skills of a product manager, and then the leadership skills as they grow up. Look at that and say, okay, the kind of person that we think is best for the job that we're trying to do today looks like this, and then interview against that. But I think you will find that article helpful. Hacking Your Product Leader Career. Okay, I have time for one last question.
No pressure. Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go. Last question, and then we'll give away some raffle prizes, and Gib will hang out, and I'm sure he'll answer some more questions. You're ready for the mic, aren't you?
Yeah, so hello.
Hello.
I have a question kind of on the context of CEO Reed Hastings saying that Netflix's biggest competition is sleep. And while this whole talk has been really interesting and really beneficial for us on kind of like the other side of us trying to create these amazing, interesting, obsessive experiences for our consumers, where do you think companies should draw the line, if they should draw the line, on consumer addiction, and perhaps even take responsibility for that?
Yeah, great question. So just the Reed was, if you figure out how to delight customers in these wonderfully hard to copy ways, you find yourself without competition. And that's really what he was saying, which creates high margin. Okay, just personal. If you look at my career, I do bang, bang, shoot 'em up games, and then I build kids' educational software like Oregon Trail. That's how old I am, okay? And then I went back to binge watching at Netflix, and then I went to Chegg, which is a textbook rental company that's saving students $500 million a year renting instead of buying. That's my answer. If you understand my household, my wife is trying to cure cancer, okay? She's the one at the end of 5 years that says, Gib, you better go do something good for the world. And I don't really have a choice, okay? And the reality is the stuff that does a better job of helping to pay for Kelsey's medical school tends to be the entertainment, but I don't give up on education. So I think it's just highly personal. And I'm just outlining my approach to the balancing act. And Netflix, I bust on them about the binge watching. But if you look at the storytelling there's just amazing stories in the documentary category. For instance, my wife was totally enamored about a story that's talking about cobalt poisoning and replacement hips. I mean, just sort of mind-blowing stuff. Anyways, I'm just giving the personal answer. Okay, there's one last thing. So Dan and I are hosting together, because we like each other so much, a workshop. And I know that Veronica, you're coming to that November 16th. It's a Friday. Yeah, cool. Anyways, if you didn't get the memo, I love teaching, so I've done a variety of talks, but then I stopped working at Stanford this fall because workshops I can iterate much more quickly instead of waiting to the next semester. So every 2 weeks I'm doing a workshop, and every week I get feedback and then I iterate, and it's amazingly fun. Anyways, come spend a day with the two of us. Dan's going to talk about lean product management. I'm going to talk about hacking your product leader career, which it's really about how do you learn all the skills of a product leader and then develop into a leader so you can do the things that you want to dent the universe. And lead product management is focused on
focus on the advice from my book on lean, product market fit pyramid and lean product process. So a kind of systematic way to achieve and improve your product market fit.
Cool. And it's at Spiro Ventures, so we have a lovely VC space, and you get food and drink too, right? Oh, good. All right. So thanks, everyone. And I just would love your feedback at www.gibsonbiddle.com. And in a minute, I'm going to figure out what the hell happened to my QR code.
All right, let's give Gib a big round of applause. Thanks a lot, Gib, for an awesome talk. Appreciate it.